It's the SDG Podcast. Before we get started, you can check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com/podcast or find us on all the social medias, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Solution Design Group. We're doing another podcast. Welcome, everybody. We got Peter Lawrence with us and Bennett Verhey, all the way from
Minecraft,
Missouri. And Dan Shui is also joining us. So thank you. Today we're going to talk about boundaries. And by boundaries, I mean, like when you start work at a customer and you say, hey, I have to leave every Thursday at 3 because we do a podcast every week and I have all the gear. Is that okay? That's a boundary.
Today Thursday?
Yeah.
Today's not Thursday, right?
No.
Okay.
Another boundary. Draw a piece of tape on the floor, tell the guy in the cube next to you that that's the wall. If they cross it, there's going to be trouble.
Okay, you've never done that, and you've never seen that.
I've seen on WKRP in Cincinnati when
that's 100%
Nestman.
Yes, I swear they could fly.
All right. So, Peter, what do you think of when you think of boundaries?
Well, I mean, especially at the beginning, it's better to get them out in the open so that everybody agrees. Even before you start out at a client, you're going to want to maybe set some boundaries before you even go, right? Like, hey, I need to work remote this day or that day or something like that. These days is kind of, it used to be assumed like you're going to be in the office every day. And if you work remote, it will be occasional and you will sign up for it with blood signature and 48 hours notice and et cetera, et cetera. So, but nowadays you kind of get that ahead of going into the client, right? Like I know you guys
want
for
to
3
start
days
with your CM and AE.
Right.
Is kind of where you begin. Yeah.
That's the easy spot. But once you're there, you got to just have that conversation. Just a reminder. We said, we agreed to this before I started. At least that's what my team told me.
So Bennett and Dan, you worked at a customer on a very big project. And I know there was a 24-hour on-call support component to it, I believe.
That's my favorite.
How did you handle that? Because that's, I've seen, firsthand, I saw a supervisor tally up the hours it would take to finish a project on time. And if our consultants work 60 hours a week, then we can finish on time. So how did you guys deal with setting boundaries for some of that stuff?
All right, I can go. As far as the case that you referenced, the 24-hour on-call stuff, that kind of stuff has to go through SDG first. So that's not really, that's not really landing on the consultant's plate directly because that involves negotiating how the, contractual pay is going to work and all that. So that's a good thing from a consultant perspective. They really have to, if they ask you to do that, and we did have conversations about that at the client you're mentioning, and, I was able to say, well, you need to talk to SDG. I can't agree to do that as an employee of SDG because I'm an employee of theirs. So they're on your side, and I didn't get asked to do that kind of stuff personally. I'll let Bennett speak to what he was asked to do. I also just want to mention before we get into this that I am not good at setting boundaries. I was under the impression that this was a therapy session, not a podcast. And I thought you guys were going to tell me how to do this.
We are. We'll get to it, Dan.
So I'm here for advice. I've got a scenario that I'm facing today I can talk about later, but I'll hand it over to Bennett as far as kind of what you're talking about, Kyle.
I know what you're referencing. And yeah, it was similar where, first off, I like that we were asked about, hey, can we intrude on your life for this period of time because there's a lot of hours that are going to be committed to this. Is that okay with you? So it was an ask. It wasn't a voluntold kind of thing, which was great.
Right.
And yeah, I think what Dan had mentioned in that too, that was a great learning opportunity to go, oh, I should have gone into that with these, like what Peter was talking about, setting expectations on do we really have to work 14 hours on Sunday? Or is that, things like that. So, or hey, when we get to the end of this, and we did a go live event, which was brutal, exhausting, exhilarating. It was grueling. A lot of fun, grueling. But it was also challenging. And we came out the other side going, holy cow, we did that. That was awesome. And Dan and I were both on the same team. So we got to know each other pretty well through that too. So I feel like we forged some good bonds with people through that process. But yeah, I on that one, it was a good learning curve to go like, oh shoot, there are these things that we need to like set up boundaries on. And in the 14 minutes that I had to prepare for this, I was doing some thoughts about what is a boundary. And it's actually ChatGPT and I were talking shortly here just to like quickly, and
that guy joins all the podcasts.
Yeah, he's great, or whatever your favorite tool is. Anyway, so it's twofold. One, a boundary keeps things out, like you're saying, like here's the wall with the tape, and if you run into it, that's the wall. But it keeps things out, but it also keeps things in. Like national borders maybe keep certain people out. Prison walls keep people in. So right. You can have two different kinds of boundaries. Like, hey, I'm not going to call you, but I also have my phone set to silent at night so that if you call me, it doesn't ring. Like there's two different directions there, if you will, on boundaries. So I don't know how that necessarily plays into the semantics of like individual, other than like a phone call or email or whatever. Like, hey, I'm going heads down during this time. So in the thing that you were referencing, Kyle, that at that client, hey kiddos, hey house, I have to commit certain amount of time for this. It was a conversation with them being like, I have to keep my office door shut. I can't let you in during this time frame because I got to do this work and it's got to be done well. Otherwise this company X will, we have to do this right the first time. And vice versa. Like, hey, I need to spend some time with my kids because, it was around Christmas time or whatnot, I believe. And it's like, I should probably
always
open
Christmas
presents with the kids, like so that there's, anyway, yeah, lots of thoughts on that, but it was a good learning curve, like Dan mentioned, and yeah.
I like your point about boundaries being both ways.
Yeah.
I think that's something that some of the consultants like live deeply. They keep everything personal tucked away. I am just a happy consultant when I'm at the client, even if my car's on fire and my dog is sick and everything else. I'm just happy to be here and ready to put in another day. Another thing that you mentioned, Bennett and Dan both, is like when the client comes to you and asks you, back in my day, and this is one of those, like when I started consulting, I've certainly put in extra hours at clients without even thinking about being asked because I kind of grew up in the old school. The job is the job. And
the pre-work-life balance generation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right? Like work-life balance is, if you don't like the balance, quit the job and go somewhere else because this is the way it's going to be. We're not going to have a conversation about work-life balance. We're just going to grind you up until, you can't take it anymore.
It wasn't a phrase in, 20, 30 years ago. Work-life balance wasn't a phrase in that culture.
No, for sure.
I think there's fear too in setting certain boundaries because
of course.
There's this, there's the message is you're fine. And if that's going to be as accommodating as we can and like, cool, set your boundaries. But sometimes you feel like if you do that, you're going to become like persona non grata and you don't want to do that. So when I say I have a hard time if I work more than 40 hours a week, not getting burned out. And they say, great. So you're on this full-time project. It's 40 hours a week. Also, this other one that you started 2 years ago talking about with the customer is happening now. So can you do that one over the holidays? I can. Yep, I will do it.
I always say yes.
Yeah, and I did it. And it sucked. And on the other side of it, I learned some valuable lessons. And I got it done, though. I learned that you have to have the render inside of the function, especially when you went from 5 testers to 100 users. And it was like, oh, these load times are slower now and things aren't loading and problems are happening. But I digress. I set boundaries, but I broke them. And I think that's important too, is just because you set a boundary doesn't mean that all the time. It doesn't mean that you can't break it to be accommodating. You know what? This is an important meeting on Thursday afternoon. I'm going to have to just let Peter know I can't podcast that day. This is 6 years ago or whatever. And that's fine. Missing an occasional one is fine. Those kind of boundaries. I have boundaries with my friends and my family, like, don't call me during the day at work because every time I get a call during the day at work, I think somebody, we lost someone, some tragedy happened. Like, why are you calling me? But I also have a boundary of no bad news during the day, like at 10 a.m., Dad, at 10 a.m., I don't need to know that we lost Michael Perry. It could, like, I can't do anything about that. Like, I don't have a resurrection spell handy. I'm not a LARPer. It's bad. So you kind of set these things, and there was a phrase or a saying or a quote, you teach people how to treat you.
That's interesting.
So if I can use that as a segue, that's an excellent segue. And I was assigned a task, did the task. It was a technical task involving a pipeline PowerShell script. I did the task, and it turned out that problem that I fixed was masking deeper, more serious problems further down the pipeline, which, of course, everybody's run into. So when they asked me to test my fix, well, the thing I was asked to fix passed the test, but then these bigger problems cropped up and broke parts of the application that had nothing to do with any of the work I did. They were just hidden before because it wasn't getting that far before. So the lead that I'm reporting to then, I've got a private Teams conversation going with him about this whole thing. We were talking all day yesterday, all day. He comes up with all these ideas about what I should do and starts typing out at furious speed in between meetings he's on, all these, what I'm sure are to him are requirements for what I need to do to fix these more serious problems as part of this story.
Interesting.
So I ended up pushing back and say, well, I think this is scope creep and we need a new story.
So your one pointer went to a 13 pointer?
Yeah. He either didn't read my comment about needing a new story or he purposefully ignored it, went on just dumping out loads of badly spelled, grammatically difficult to understand requirements. Then at the very end said, I'm signing off now, let me know when you're done. And so that's where I'm at. So I need to figure out how to respond to this situation.
Well, I think that's perfect.
I have been there.
Here's what what'd you do?
I did it the best I could because it's for the customer. Customer's got to win. But I communicated a lot, and then I used it as a educational moment to send. And if, I got a hold of them when I needed to. Like, I invaded their boundary of, I won't be here the rest of the day. I will find you and I will call you and I will text and I will, whatever it takes, I'll send a Raven. And it's just, you muddle through it. You got to come to like some kind of compromise where nobody wins.
No way. Okay.
Dig your heels in, Dan. Don't listen to Peter, listen to me.
Dan, 2 years ago, I'm right with Kyle. I'm there. I'm rolling up my sleeves and I'm like, I'm going to spell check this, fix this, and go to town. Now, what I would tell you to do is, isn't it wonderful that he created the acceptance criteria for your new story that may or may not be brought into the sprint depending on how the team feels about that. That's kind of what I'm
thinking, yeah. Yep. I started grabbing all of his chat. I'm trying to figure out a way to dump the chat history out of Teams, but apparently I can't do it with my permission. So I'm copying all of these requirements into the story saying, here's what this person is saying. This may be useful when we talk about this, hopefully, as a team and not just me and this person on a private chat.
No, that's a stand-up thing. Like, hey guys, look, I made the fix, and all of a sudden, I've found some new challenges for us, and we can do this in the sprint. We can decide as a team, and I will go back to, it's a nice thing to lean on, sort of that agile manifesto type thing where you have to decide as a team if you're going to take on that work. You can't have just one person throw some things in Teams and say, I must have to do that because it's in Teams.
Yeah.
That's not how it works.
Thank you.
Another boundary. Sorry, Bennett, go ahead.
What's this person's relationship to you? Like
this person's relationship to me is
I agree.
Reluctant team lead. This person kind of stepped into the role of finding me work because nobody else did, but they are fond of reminding me that it is not their job to find me work whenever they find me work.
I think that's awesome though, because then that, if they're reluctant team lead, then they may have so there's two types of leadership: positional and permission-based and position-based, right? So are they like actually over top of you position-wise? Not that it matters. I agree with Peter. It doesn't matter, but maybe it gives you a little extra leverage. Like if they're not a VP saying, we need this done tomorrow, that weighs a little more than somebody on your team that's kind of pseudo taking on the leadership of the team to say, we need this done. Yeah. But I think you're doing the right thing, like get it into a story and have the team point it, or however, to be like, hey, this is actually this amount of effort, because I think the boundaries that's being crossed is a scope boundary, right?
Yeah.
Like there's scope creep, there's a boundary creep there.
Yeah. Anyway, I appreciate the thoughts.
I think this is good that we're talking about this, and it's sort of like an inside glimpse into consulting that we're not perfect.
No.
Sometimes it's a struggle, and but we get through it, figure it out. This makes me want to work in an Agile project so that I could actually get some experience with working in an actual like Agile, Scrum, whatever project.
And don't get me wrong, Kyle, that it doesn't necessarily solve this problem, but it provides you the tools to help you push back on someone who's trying to push it forward. Like, we're just
there's a time
into the sprint.
Yeah, there's a time thing too. Is it like an emergency? Is this an outage? Is it or is it something that can wait?
Of course, that's not my call. This thing, I mean, it's clearly been broken before now. They just didn't know it until I fixed the thing that was masking the additional brokenness. So it's not
maybe
a production outage.
Maybe the solution is to put the error back in so that it doesn't get passed into there, and then solve the back end problem sort of with a little bit of filtering going on. But that's a great discussion for the team.
I think
so. It sounds to me like that one of my boundaries, I have is always closing the loop, and you guys haven't closed the loop. There's this requirements dump that was sent out to you that you're kind of muddling through or trying to figure out right now. But it's like there's no agreement back. There's no response of you never got, he gave you something, you never got to comment on it and agree and say, okay, that sounds good.
Yeah.
And in those situations, it's like, well, we're not done yet. I'm not going to take this. I'm not going to take this on as my thing, because we're not done yet figuring out what my thing is and the right thing is, because I haven't closed the loop. So you're off the hook.
Yeah. I think getting those requirements into a story or a ticket or whatever process that is, and shedding light on it from the perspective of getting the team's eyes on it. And I think at that, not trying to pull people to your side or leverage that as but just be like, hey, here's what we're being asked to do, and then what do you guys think about this? Because to the point of if you're actually running an Agile team there, and I'm just curious, do you have a Scrum Master that can also, typically they can clear hurdles and things like that?
But anyway, this is all great feedback, so I appreciate it.
But honestly, Dan, that 2 years ago me would have just done it. 1 year ago, me would have, or been if let's say it was just a tiny fix. Oh, it's just a tiny fix I need to make that's outside the scope of my story. I'll just do that and sneak that in. Yeah. It's way easier than writing a story and keeping track of and doing anything like that. But today me says, no, even that 1 point story needs to get shoved back in front of the team. So
that there's transparency, right? Otherwise, it's just secret knowledge that's not really fair to the rest of the team.
Yeah. Yeah, you need to drag it to the light, and you will. I think.
I mean, we've all been on teams where somebody says, "Oh yeah, by the way, over the weekend I refactored 35 different objects, and I checked those in this morning. Let me know if there's any problems."
Yeah,
I think I've been in the shoes of the person you're talking about.
Oh, sure.
Where I was really on my way out the door and had the weekend on my mind, and I dished off hey, can you do these things, and gave incomplete information and stuff like that. And it was when I came back, I felt kind of bad about it, because I was confronted. You can't just leave and disappear. I call it the Houdini.
Did you drop a smoke bomb and then shoot out the door?
Yeah. Okay. But it's I was so focused on
around my house.
I was so focused on the thing I wanted to do that I just had to get this off my plate, and I dished it off. I've had people dish things onto me.
So I think that I think one key point about boundaries is that people can be afraid to draw them. Like I said, I've always struggled with it. because a lot of us want to be people pleasers, especially if you're a consultant. You want to make your client happy. But if you don't draw boundaries, it's kind of the fences make good neighbors, good fences make good neighbors thing. If you don't draw good boundaries, it's not really fair to anybody, yourself or the client.
Or the
You're putting yourself in you're putting yourself in a position they're going to inadvertently take advantage.
Yeah.
You might have a 40-hour cap, like you just don't have the energy, whatever. You have some kind of other thing going on for 50 and you haven't set the boundary with them, and you're the kind of person like I am, a people pleaser. I have a really hard time saying no. You punish yourself and others sometimes by not setting boundaries.
Yeah.
Because now you're burned out and now they're working with a burned out person.
Yes.
And when that happens, resentment, like all the bad things kind of seep in, and bitterness and all of that, which really are not good for a project.
Never been there at the end of a project.
So to me, that's saying that we kind of have a professional obligation to set boundaries because 100%. It's the right thing. It's the right thing to do. Right?
That is professionalism.
Are you going to help or hurt the company that you're working for, depending on, do you just suck it up and do it, or do you push back and say, nope, we got to do this? You can get the thing done, but there's also the culture there. And are you helping make the culture of that client better or worse, depending on your actions?
Or are you enabling dysfunction by acquiescing that's going to hurt them in the long term?
Yeah,
oh, for sure.
So do you ever set boundaries of what you're willing to do in terms of like your expertise, your role? Like, okay, I'm coming in to do this thing. And I used to do this. I just want you to know I am not a programmer. I do not write code. I'm not doing that stupid clock problem, Peter. And if you ask me, I'm going to grab my Fuddruckers and get it to go.
Did I tell you that this client gave me the clock problem as an interview question?
Nice.
And sat there and watched me on a Teams meeting while I failed miserably. And I finally just said, well, I know it's a trigonometry problem, but my trigonometry is a little rusty right now. And they hired me anyway.
It's not trigonometry, but that's okay.
But
I was going to answer the inverse, that the whole border versus prison thing. I actually had this out at a client right now, and age boundaries. I recently discovered I'm actually a millennial, which I didn't realize and whatnot. So I figured I'd try my newfound millennialism and ask for some things, which is outside of a boundary that I normally, like, I don't try to push things or whatever. And to this exact thing, like, I came in and expecting one thing, and it kind of morphed into this other thing outside of the super typical things that I would do. I asked, the client said such and such responsibilities are, I can do them, but I really like doing these other things that are in my wheelhouse. Any chance that, I can keep doing these things, but is any chance we, if we're going to add more onto the plate, could we add things over in this bucket of work versus the current thing? And normally I would never ask that. It's like, all right, get done what they're asking. Let's do this thing, check the boxes, And so use my newfound, I'm a millennial, to like ask for something. And it felt really weird and awkward, but to my surprise, I found them to be very accommodating, being like, well, you should, let us know if you want more of that thing. That's easy to do. We can give this other stuff to other people if, that's not a problem at all. We have plenty of leeway here.
If you're not an Excel expert, that's fine.
Yeah, right. But I was like pleasantly surprised at the willingness / accommodation of the client to have that door open. Something I would never have done 2-3 years ago, but
before
now that I know I'm a millennial. Yeah, before I was a millennial. Now I know that, and I can ask. You're
a retroactive millennial?
I guess so, yeah. Anyway.
I don't like it. I think I'm going to put you in Gen X with us.
All right. I'll do whatever.
I don't want to get into the discussion, but it goes Gen X, then millennials. Is that those are neighboring?
Yeah, the kids
people?
of the Gen Xers. I'm a cuspy Gen Xer. I'm the first year that they decided people were called Gen X. So.
Nice.
Excellent. So go ahead, Peter.
All right. I was going to just run with Bennett's example of how even like I said, 2 years ago, me wouldn't have done these things because I just didn't learn that lesson. And now I've learned that lesson, and you're right. Like this podcast has opened up my eyes. I used to say that I would wash the client's car if that's what they wanted to spend their consulting dollars on. And I believe Chad said, and Chad's the other podcaster that's here regularly, said, that is ridiculous. There's no way you should do that. That is not something that you should even be asked. And I'm like, well, I guess that's right. I mean, I've never been asked to wash a car, don't get me wrong, but I probably would have done it 10 years ago without even thinking, without even letting my consultant manager know, like on my status report, washed 7 cars, got them shiny. And they would read that and go, what are you doing? Well, they asked me to wash cars. And now I'd be like, well, maybe we need to talk with my support staff and let's make sure that car washing is something that you guys really want. And maybe we can find somebody to wash cars that's not me.
Yeah. What is the AC? How do we know when the car's washed? I mean, I don't even.
Yeah,
exactly. There's no story for that.
Yeah. Well, let me check.
I don't even know how many points that is.
Let me check with SDG and see if we have, car wash detailer consultant available.
I can send them over.
And I'll have them get in touch with you. Yeah, I was the same way. I did tech support. Hey, can you help this person fix this thing? It's like, yeah, I can. But just so you know, it's like my rate's my rate. And that's, if you want me to help migrate OneNotes for a week, that's a week I'm not doing what you brought me here to do, but I will do it.
Right.
But now maybe that's not fair.
Yeah, I've had to do a lot of that I've been asked to do a lot of things where I had to have that exact conversation. I'll do React. It's going to take me 3 times longer than a good React person. And somebody's probably going to rewrite it in 6 weeks. But if you want to pay money for me to do that now, I will do it. And
did you want me to learn React today? Okay, I'm in.
Your work on that InfoPath form and SharePoint for those marketing folks was rock solid.
InfoPath, I remember that vaguely from a previous life.
Yeah, I had to go make some enhancements to it, and you were like, just so you know, I'm not a SharePoint expert and all that.
Kyle, this conversation never happened. Anybody watching this podcast, I am not a SharePoint expert. Go hire Kyle.
Man, he was good. It was without even knowing it. He just somehow knew it. He's a savant. No, I wouldn't. I won't make you. I have no power anyway.
So Kyle, let me ask you this
imposing. Go ahead, and then I want to talk about imposing boundaries on your team.
Well, okay, maybe you can swing this that way because you're the IT department at SDG.
Yes.
And you probably get asked to do all sorts of things. And your job description has a lot of gray areas in it.
What's a job description? So when I'm moving furniture around, when I'm the AV guy, when I'm desktop support, when I'm the sysadmin for 20 different cloud platforms, or, podcasting, or I will, if I have the time and I can help, I will. And then there's also there's no one else factor. There's no one else that's going to be able to do this in 10 minutes. If someone else has to do it, it's going to take them an hour and then my 10 minutes. My boundary is that I don't respond to a tech support request via Slack for 15 minutes unless it's very specific and I know what it is. But then I will get a follow-up message, I figured it out. So I give that buffer to give them a chance to figure it out.
Do you have
because
20 timers
they're still
running?
trying. They're still trying to figure it out even though they ask for help. But I have clear priorities. That's how my boundaries are really about my priorities.
Okay.
And keeping people working, keeping people unstuck, keeping people in the tools they need, the systems they need. I want the systems to be faster than they are. And then Peter's like, yeah, I'll use a MacBook Air that's 20 years old. And then he's like, man, this thing's slow. I'm going to need something else. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm still bitter. So I've had a few situations.
I tried.
I've had a few situations where I should have imposed a boundary on somebody else. It was a fixed bid project, and half the time was my SharePoint work, and half the time was his database work. And he took all of his time and half of my time.
Right.
and he was taking work direction from the wrong person, and they kind of went down this rabbit hole. And
give you this report.
Yeah. Oh, it'd be cool. It'd be cool if we did. It's like, this is not Christmas morning. Like, we're going to do what they asked. And if anybody's going to give you work direction, it's going to be the person that brought us in and that's leading the charge. So then I'm just scrambling, to get it done. I wouldn't push the scope. I just went into hyper-focus mode and gutted through it. Some long days and all that, but I should have said, okay, this is how we're going to roll.
And should have had that conversation at the start, right?
Yeah, with the other consultant. We each have our own time, and we can't be dipping into each other's time. If you're going to dip into my time, that's a scope change. So you learn those lessons. I was always wanting to do more customer work. And sometimes, SharePoint projects were kind of short in a lot of cases. And some of them I made shorter or non-existent because I went and talked to people about them. And I'm like, your problem isn't technology. Your problem is that people need to do things and you're not in charge of those people. And so they don't have to listen to you.
Right.
So no, it's not worth the time. But it's things like that, setting those as a team. It's like, okay, do we have all those figured out of as a team, how we're going to roll? Scope is a boundary, scope changes. You have boundaries in your stand-ups. We're only going to talk about these things. Do you do enough of that? Is there a art to that?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that, how you apply that with the team. There's a little bit of the inter-team dynamics, and there's, like I said before, leadership by position. So if somebody is, actually got the position, the title, whatever, but leadership by position, or sorry, by not position.
Permission.
Permission. Yeah, thank you. If you can become a trusted member of the team, be like, hey guys, I think we should think about this other thing. That might open up to some extra scope creep, and we need to have that locked down before we pull this in. Maybe let's have that conversation. Turn it over to the other guys. I have a thought I want to bring up too on a self-imposed boundary for myself down the stream.
I'm glad you said that, because you said something, Kyle. You said you should have done this, you should have done that. So I have a self-imposed boundary that I've learned after much trial and error in my life, and that's to just get those words out of your vocabulary. The whole should have, could have, would have. Just don't use that language. And whenever anybody asks me, during a post-mortem or whatever, what would you have done differently? I always get a little rankled, and I said, there is no doing it differently. We did it the way we did it. What can we learn? Sure. That language is self-defeating. So that's a boundary I have, just to not use that language. I should have done this. You're just beating yourself up when you say that.
You're right, Dan.
We do the best.
I should not have used that language.
You should not have done that, Kyle. Shame on you. We do the best we can. And it's easy to say should have when you have new information that you didn't have at the time.
Of course.
So it's not really fair to yourself. So that's just a personal boundary I have, not to use that kind of language with myself.
Is that implying, hey, if I should have done this, meaning I didn't do it to the best of my ability with the information given? Is that kind of the thought?
If that's how you feel, if maybe you feel like you dropped the ball, fine. Then think about that a little bit. Why did I drop the ball? Maybe you were going through a difficult time. Maybe you didn't have the energy to fully stand up to the task at hand. That's okay. That happens to people, but there's no point in just kicking yourself about it.
I had a project where the needs of one of the groups were different than everybody else. But for some reason, that team got lumped in, and it's like, okay, we're going to take all your information, establish metadata, taxonomy. We're going to organize it that way. This is how you're going to do it. When you put a document in, you got to fill these things out. Then it's going to be, we can view it 60 different ways, and it's going to be awesome. And we're going to get rid of all your folders. And that was great for
cloud tags.
That was great for everybody else, but they were not the consumers that needed to go to that place to get without having to know and think about it. There's information architecture that leads them to what they need. Well, this group didn't work that way. They didn't use that. It was but I brought them into that structure. And so what would I have done differently? I would have left them alone. And so I always think about that. Dan should have warned me about that.
I mean, the takeaway from that is consider the audience when you're developing stuff. make sure it fits the intended audience's needs. And that's a valuable lesson going forward. But, unless the universe starts contracting, check the Space Channel for more on that. You're not going to be able to do it again.
That's right. So again, it's one of those things, like the lesson learned is that you may need to look and be able to ask that question, is this really something that I should be doing, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Is this what I need to be doing? I can do it, but is now the time, and is this the right place? Yeah. And to ask those questions.
Yeah, that's a fair question.
I've run into the inverse of that a couple times, where it's the client or somebody at the client is saying, hey, do this thing, but from a technical perspective, it's like, that is definitely not the right thing that we should be doing. It should be this other thing. And I recommend you don't do that. No. We got to do it this way. But, hey, I'm going to let you know downstream when we, or if we do it this way, there's going to be these implications, and you're going to struggle with this, or the cost is going to shoot sky high, or things like that. And I've seen this, I've done this before, and I have this gut feeling, and here's the things that have happened. It's not going to, nope. So, hey, thanks for your input, consultant.
Consequences.
But we're going to do, like one of the things I at one client, I pushed really hard on, this is going to cost you guys millions of dollars, like extra. It's going to be not stable. This other way to do it's easier, cheaper, more stable. Like, why can't we do it this way? And I argued and argued and argued. And I've heard a few people anyway say, like, they have the 3-strike rule, where they'll put their position or opinion on something out there a few times, and then, it really is the client to, Peter's got 2-strike rule, or two. Anyway,
we've talked about twice. Otherwise, you're just complaining.
Yeah.
That's where I felt like I was getting to, and I probably was. So now I don't do that anymore to that level, because it's like, well, hey, all right, I've given my 2 cents, and now it's, they've said they really want it, so we're going to do it that way. And they're the ones that have to live with the consequences. And I don't mean to say it that way, like it's mean or derogatory at all, but it's like, if that's the direction they want to go, then we got to help them get there, even though we've maybe offered advice or consulting the other way.
There may be hidden variables that you're not aware of. There may be political reasons why they're doing things a certain way that you're not privy to and may never be privy to. Maybe we're using this software project because the CEO's wife runs a startup, and they get a kickback, or who knows? There could be all sorts of...
It's the best golf trip.
Yeah.
So let me just sweep up Bennett's thing here. Like, yes, you do try to explain to them twice, and you do give them rationale, and you give them reasoning, and you document it, and you say, here's what I expect to happen in the future. I'm just going to prepare this way for you guys, because you may have to pull all the way back to this point. I've been at this fork in the road. I've taken the right branch. We got 2 miles up there, and then the cliff face was right in our way. So we had to bring it all the way back to this fork and go the other way, and it was really expensive to do that twice. I'm just going to explain it to you, and we'll have fun getting to that cliff.
Yeah. You guys have the 2 or 3, whatever. Mine is, you will never hear the end of this. It will haunt you. I will show up at your kid's graduation party just to remind you about that decision you made that cost $1 million.
Sounds like you need to set some boundaries.
I do. I'm horrible at boundaries. I set them and then I ignore them. What's the difference between a boundary and a rule?
Well, I think a boundary is simpler than a rule. A rule is a demarcation, a line that you're going to stay on one side of. A rule can be instructions for how to carry out a sequence of events, right?
So I just wanted to make the distinction that boundaries are not rules, because rules are not a good thing. Rules are very constricting and restrictive, and
boundaries are like HTML. Rules are like C#, right? The boundary, it's like, here's the right edge of the table. Like, everything to the right of this is not the table.
Unless it is. Unless it's not.
And, it's your boundary to enforce or to ignore. And you're setting a boundary.
Real boundaries are, right? Like, there are some boundaries that are fairly loose, right? The EU has they have boundaries, but people can go back and forth pretty easily and stuff like that. I've heard, not been there, but, Minnesota and Wisconsin, there's a boundary there, right? There's signs on the highway when you drive, now leaving Minnesota, welcome to Wisconsin. It really didn't feel that much different when you cross that place.
And this is I love this analogy because the rules can change when you cross boundaries, right? When I was a teenager, the drinking age in Minnesota was 19, but in Wisconsin it was 18. One boundary, different rules on different sides.
And it was pretty close and easy to drive to, right, Dan?
I'm not saying I ever did that. I'm also not saying I never did that.
My brother lived with me for a while, and I work fairly hard, and at least I try to, and or I try to convince people I do. And I get home, and he hasn't been talking to anybody all day, and I've been training people all day and explaining things and tutoring and whatever. So I've been talking all day, and I get home and it's just a wave of, he's like, it's a person, and unleashes. I'm like, you have to, I said, I'm not home yet. Just because I walked through that door doesn't mean I'm home. You got to give me a half an hour to an hour to make the transition.
You have a Telecaster.
I'll gladly talk to you about your day. A what?
You have a Telecaster and an amplifier, right?
I do. I should play it. Yeah.
You should play it loud, and then.
Well, that's like I have a buddy that is not good at understanding boundaries.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's like a wiring issue.
There are a lot of people like that.
Yeah.
They're just not aware that they're not respecting boundaries. It's not really their fault. They just have trouble recognizing or trouble with self-awareness, I think.
Yeah.
Kyle just brought up an awesome boundary that's been blurred, which is the drive home. As we've been doing more work from home after the COVID craziness, now a lot of us are still working from home.
Yeah.
So I have kids and my wife's here, and we have dogs and things. Like, what's that boundary like between work and home? Before we had a work. The work-life balance is now like the work-life soup.
Yeah.
How do you guys balance that or boundary that?
It's Friday. It's Friday, and I'm in my office. That's how I do it. Is I come into the office every day.
Yeah, you do. I've kind of struggled with that a little because my family's good about not bugging me when I'm working, but I didn't really realize till COVID how much of my commute was like decompressing from the workday, and that's gone now. I go downstairs and I'm still like wound up from the workday and not always in a great mood to be a good companion or a conversational partner to somebody because I'm still a little like jacked up and stressed out.
You need to have that like decontamination between your office and the rest of the house, where you got to go through and different stages. They spray it down with stuff, and
it's like that.
And then once you get out the other side, you're clean. You're good to go. You're free of disease.
Yeah, just need like some like electrodes on your brain to like zap all the work memories, so they're just like gone until the next day.
So I have two boundaries, right? One is the clock. I know when I'm done working because I've put in my time for the day. And that time stops. If I still need some buffering between brilliant conversation and me, I'll sit at my desk, not working, and cannot look at the computer, not anything.
Yeah.
I'm going to take that downtime. And then when I'm ready, I could play, if I had a guitar at my side, I would play it. And then when I'm ready to meet the world, I will leave the sanctum of the office and get out there.
Yeah, I kind of do something similar.
And there's certainly times where they've come down at like 5 o'clock and said, "Are you still working?" No, but I needed a whole hour to decompress today, apparently.
Yeah.
So
here's a boundary that, Bennett, you were talking about. Either it's to keep someone in or out. Being confined to 40 hours a week. Some gigs where they budgeted for 40 hours a week. And so you say, well, there's a lot of stuff to do. It'd be cool if I could put in another 10 hours this week. And no, you can't do it. I'm like, okay. And then in that case, we have to respect those boundaries. I think it's really important to respect your customers' boundaries.
When you have to respect yours, right? You're not going to work for free.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which is the alternative, right? Oh, I can work extra 10 hours and just not be paid.
Not bill, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, forget that.
That's not a good boundary to
don't ever
to
do
step
that.
over.
No. We got 4 minutes left. 4 minutes left on the clock.
We have a boundary for this.
So any last words, last thoughts, parting thoughts?
So my parting thought, and my oldest daughter owns her own licensed marriage and family therapy business, and so I've learned a lot from her, and boundaries come up a lot, and I see her with her kids. But one of the things I've learned from her is we owe it to ourselves to draw boundaries, work boundaries, relationship boundaries. Because we might think doing the best thing for other people by pleasing them all the time, but we're not. We're hurting ourselves, and when you hurt yourself, you hurt the people around you. So we owe it to ourselves. That's my 2 cents.
I like it. Bennett?
I think setting the boundaries reminds me of something that my family talks about a lot, which is there's a difference between a peacekeeper and a peacemaker. And peacekeepers just try to keep the peace. Yep, I'm just going to do the thing and don't want to rock the boat. Peacemakers will say, nope, we got to set the boundary. We got to do this thing. And on the other side of that turmoil, there's peace that's being made. And that, as a newfound millennial, that work-life balance is an awesome thing. And as I'm learning and whatnot, that's a great thing to have for myself, so that when I do return to home, even though I'm in the office next to the room that everybody else is in, I can walk back home and be good in that environment too.
I'm going to steal Bennett's and say it's good to remember that there are 2 kinds of boundaries: those that keep things in and those that keep things out. And setting those appropriately for yourself and for your workplace and for your team and for your company, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. As long as if you can work in a team and keep everybody, hey, this is my boundary, I shall not cross, or whatever. I think that helps everybody.
Boundaries can be filters. Mm-hmm. And I think that and I set this right away, I'm not on call. I will come in, I will work my butt off, 8 or 10 or whatever it takes to get the job done. But when I'm off work, I'm not on call. And then someone calls me at 8 o'clock because I got a phishing email and they're panicking. I answer that call and I help them out. And because I'm filtering out like anybody just deciding, I'll just, Kyle will help me. And it's like, I want to filter out so that the important stuff, like if I got somebody like worried and panicking about something because I did too good of a job of scaring them about security and phishing emails, I don't want that person to take that to bed. Like, right. It's like I will sacrifice a little bit of my time and happiness, whatever, if it's going to, make a large impression on somebody else. I can't get in. I really need to get into my laptop and I can't get in. Can you help me? Yeah, I can. But I'm making that decision to answer my phone.
Yeah. And that's like almost a biological metaphor. It's the boundary as membrane. That's like our cells are like that. Mm-hmm. They let some things through and not other things.
Boundaries as membranes. I like that. Well, it's 1 o'clock. We hit our boundary.
That's right.
So I think it's time to shut her down and say goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Solution Design Group is a digital product consultancy in Minneapolis. Check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com or look for us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.